Yo YouTube, what is going on? It's your boy SalvationsElite. We're back with another video, guys, and I'm really excited about this video, man. We're talking about ranked play today, or league play today, and I kept track of my stats for 100 straight games, and I went in on all these stats, kept track of a lot of different things. I think we find out some really interesting things about how matchmaking works when playing with parties and playing with players in different divisions, how I played specifically in different game modes, and how I played specifically on different maps, because there's massive differences with maps, game modes, and teammates for how I played, and that all affected my performance. And I think it's really important to recognize those differences when you're playing league play, so you can be more self-aware of what to expect going into each match, and not have to be as frustrated with not playing well, or don't get too hyped about playing great when you're obviously playing just against bad players. So all that we're talking about in this video. I think the stats were really fun to go through. I'm excited to see what we can learn together. So I highly recommend that you guys keep track of your stats as well, because it helped me a lot to really focus in and improve in each match. And it was a fun time keeping track of the stats. So before we dive into the stats real quick, in the last video, we talked about CoD Champs, did a predictions, a previous video for CoD Champs, and I really recommend that you guys go watch that if you haven't already. I thought it was a really good video. We covered a lot of interesting things about Champs, players, teams, bracket, pool play, everything else, predictions, favorites, dark horses. We went through a lot in like 10 or 11 minutes, or however long the video was, and so I recommend that before you watch this one, go check that one out. And let's just hop right into the stats now. So I think we should start out big picture and then kind of break it down from there. So overall, we're just gonna start out with like just the stats themselves. Damage, KD, probably the two most important ones. Generally what we need to look for here is the damage is generally the most important thing, correlated in Black Ops 4. Then probably EKIA KD is the next most important thing. Then debatably scored probably be next most important. And then you kind of go down the line from there. So to put this into context, unfortunately, somehow for this whole 100 games, I never got placed back into Masters. So I was in Masters like in June and May and April, like kind of in that time I was definitely in Masters. And before that I was like in between Masters and Elite. And then I got dropped down to Elite like after one of the updates and never got put back into Masters. So I'm not exactly sure why, but see, that's important to take into consideration when it comes to, the whole stats situation. So I think we should start with some graphs that are broken down between game modes. To start off with control. As you guys can see here, the control damage was really interesting. We started off a little slow, not as hot as I would have liked to, but we really finished in a pretty nice spot. The 100th game was a really nice one. Or the last control game at least was a really nice one, like 7,500 damage in that game. We started out averaging under 4,000 damage, and we finished averaging around 4,600 damage. So we actually had quite the increase in average throughout the time, as you guys have seen here with the plot line. Like a pretty good steady increase in damage for control. I've really been a flex, a quote-unquote flex for most of the year in Black Ops 4. But when the SOG meta hit, that was like halfway through these games. I think it was like a game like 52 or something. SOG meta changed, and I really fell back in love with the SOG when we got hit scan again. So that does take some part, just because of the guns I was using. So I definitely started playing faster with the SOG, which did correlate to increasing my damage. Interestingly enough, we do see a decrease in my KD, which is weird and kind of surprising. I do correlate that to me still getting used to playing with the SOG, because as you guys can see here, I started off a little bit better, averaging like a 1.6, 1.7, somewhere in there. And then I dipped down below to just below a 1.5 by the end of my time on average. But like you can see here in the middle, these middle 20 to 35 games were all kind of bad, all between 1 and 1.5 for the most part. And again, these games are broken down in game numbers of control. So the 25th game would roughly be when that SOG meta changed. That's right when the KD started dropping a little bit. So I was still trying to get used to the SOG meta. Maybe some justification, but at the end of the day, my damage per game was significantly going up, which is definitely still really important. Obviously, in control, the EKIA to death ratio is important, because dying more means your team has a less likely chance to win. But when I'm talking about just purely skill-based and trying to get better as a player myself, half these games were with teammates, half the games weren't. And so to me personally, the damage is more important than the KD in rank play, just in this situation. But obviously, you might disagree. So these were my average kills per game. You can also see that they increased from around 25, 26 to 30, 31. So, I mean, I was definitely increasing my pace of play, playing faster, getting more EKIAs per game. So that was positive as well. So now let's transition to hardpoint. So this is also really interesting. I thought this was really interesting. Is the hardpoint damage drastically increased. Like, look at this, man. We went from averaging like 4,200 damage per game to almost 6,000, like 5,900 damage per game in hardpoint. So I saw massive increases in my hardpoint play. started even changing before the SOG meta changed. So if you look here at the beginning, I was having some bad games below 3,000 damage in one game. Like I must have got torched that game. And like below 4,000 damage in mini games. After that 18th game of hardpoint, my game really started to improve, and we never dipped below like 4,200 damage or so after that. So I really improved in the hardpoint game, which is what I'm really excited about after all this. Is just seeing that alone gets me hyped. So again, I did have a slight decrease in my KD throughout the time. The biggest thing is that this attributes to my Maddox play versus my SOG play. So before, I was playing with the Maddox. If you just look at CWL, you're going to see that the guys who are running the Maddox have higher KDs on average than the guys running the SOGs. That's just how it works. Because you're playing entry level with the SOG, you're diving into hills first. The ARs are baiting you a lot of the time. So to have only this side of a KD decrease in hardpoint with having that massive of a damage per game increase, that's pretty positive for me, and I'm really excited about that overall. So like I said in the intro, one of the most interesting things for me was seeing the matchmaking differences when playing with players who are in Masters versus playing players who are not in Masters. And there definitely is a difference in how I played and my play overall, playing with quote-unquote better teammates. So this sheet right here is split up between teammates. So as you guys can see on this right side, team of 1 for all these games, team of 1 for all these games. These are split up into game modes as well. Team of 2 with Wes, and Wes is a Masters player. He's probably the best player I know. On my friends list, where I have a lot of you guys added, he's at the top of basically every single leaderboard for the most part, and he's a nasty player. Then it's split between some of my other buddies, split between Caleb. I love Caleb, but he is unfortunately the lowest ranked of all the friends who I play with. And so we're going to kind of compare my KDs and damage per game with Wes versus myself versus Caleb. So on my own, playing solo, this in the elite division in control, I averaged 4,200 damage per game and 1.34 EKIA death ratio. In hardpoint, I averaged 5,300 damage per game with a 1.54 EKIA ratio. Playing with Wes, I didn't have, this is a much smaller sample size obviously, but as you guys can see here, I only averaged 3,800 damage per game. So I went from 4,200 damage per game to 3,800 damage per game, and I went from a 1.34 EKIA death ratio to a 1.1. Yikes, not good, dude. That is rough. So in hardpoint, it wasn't nearly as bad. I went from like 5,300 damage to about 5,100 damage, and I went from a 1.54 KD ratio to a 1.27 with Wes. So that wasn't nearly as bad as control. Apparently I suck in control playing in Masters Division. So that's something I need to work on and look at and see how I can improve myself. But what's interesting is that when I play with Caleb, who is generally in the, okay, I can't remember. The one right below elite, whatever the one below elite's called. No idea. Expert, is that what it's called? And anyway, it's a small sample size, only 5 games of control, a handful more in hardpoint. But what's interesting, in these 5 games of control, I was really good. I mean, 2 KD and over 5,000 damage per game in control. And then in hardpoint, we had 5,300 damage per game and a 1.65 KD. So compare that to me playing by myself, a 1.54 KD and a 5,300 damage in hardpoint. And then in control, 4,200 damage and 1.34 KD. So massive improvement in control. Again, smaller sample size, so you have to, get a little bit give or take. But there is 100% still skill-based matchmaking in rank play. People who complain about that, there still is skill-based matchmaking in rank play. Just the stats show it. But I thought that was really, really interesting. After all this, I found some really interesting things about the game modes as well. So first of all, what's really weird is I only played 4 gridlock hardpoints and 5 gridlock controls in 100 games. Where like I played 20 Hacienda hardpoints and 16 seaside controls. So I don't know how that's possible. How gridlock was so rare. I don't know what it is, but they had something broken about their matchmaking or something, because that should not be possible. Anyway, but if you guys look at this, so this is really, really interesting. Look at my stats on these maps versus other maps. And there's an obvious difference in what maps I'm good at and which ones I'm not. So let's look at hardpoint first. As you guys can see, Seaside, a 1.86 on Seaside, but a 1.17 on gridlock. Again, I only played 4 matches, just so it was a puny sample size, but that's a massive difference. So I definitely need to work on my gridlock hardpoint. A 1.66 on Arsenal, 1.58 on Frequency, a 1.49 on Hacienda. And one thing that's interesting, I think, is the damage on Hacienda. I do 5,300-ish damage on Hacienda per game, but I only have a 1.49 KD. Whereas on Seaside, I do a 5,200 damage per game, but a 1.86 KD. So play a little bit more tactical on Seaside or something like that. A little bit more controlled on C-side. I don't know what it is, but just plays significantly better on C-side for whatever reason. Control is also really interesting. C-side, once again, is the map for me, man. 1.98 KD on C-side, 1.45 on gridlock, 1.39 on frequency, a 1.37 on arsenal. The most damage, once again, on C-side, second most on frequency, which only makes sense, third most arsenal, fourth most gridlock. I definitely need to keep improving on my gridlock play. That's obviously the map that I need to get the most work on in the next few weeks. The map selection is really interesting. The difference in skill-based matchmaking based on who you're playing with was really interesting as well. I obviously played worse when I was with Wes, who's in the Masters division, and I played way better with Caleb, who's in the Expert division, the one right below Elite. And so like that definitely made a big difference. And then of course, again, the game modes, I significantly improved in hardpoint and improved somewhat in control throughout the 100 games. So overall, I thought it was an awesome experience recording all of this down and really trying to get better at the game. It was really good for me in the summer to do this, to have a goal for myself going to each game, being motivated inside of ranked play. Sometimes obviously league can get really boring. Doesn't feel like there's much of an objective, doesn't feel like you're getting better, doesn't feel like you're improving. But it just shows that if you go into the game with an objective, trying to get better, and being self-aware of how you're getting better and where you need to improve, you can improve over just a month and a half or so playing it through 100 games. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I highly encourage that you guys do this as well. Keep track of your stats, help you improve as a player. But as always, guys, if you guys enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe. Share it if you guys really enjoyed it. Again, I always appreciate it. I appreciate all the support on the videos, and it means a lot to me. But as always, guys, I'm SalvationsElite, and we will see you next time. I'm out.